Welcome to Love and Abuse, the show about helping you identify poisonous communication and toxic behavior. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. That's why it's important that you learn to pinpoint manipulative and controlling behavior so that you keep your power and your sanity. I'm your host, Paul Coliani. Welcome to another episode of Love and Abuse. All the information on this show is meant for educational purposes only. Always seek a professional for your mental health and well-being, and always pick your battles wisely. I'm glad you're here today. I want to talk about something I talked about near the beginning of this podcast when I first created it back in February of 2019. There was an episode that I came out with. I think I called it, Am I the Manipulative One? I wanted you to make sure that you knew who was being emotionally abusive, controlling, manipulative, so that you understood where you fit in and where they fit in. And throughout the last almost 3 years now, I have tried to help you understand where you fit in the emotionally abusive relationship. And I hope that I have done that. I hope that I've been able to help you understand your role, where you fit in. Are you the victim? Are you the perpetrator? Are you a little bit of both? There are people that have written to me saying, I have been a victim of this and I have also been hurtful. My first question to somebody who says that to me is, did it begin after this relationship, or after this relationship started? In other words, did your abusive behavior toward them, if you've been a victim to emotional abuse or control or anything like that, did your abusive behavior start toward them only after the relationship began? Or did you bring that into the relationship? That's the second part of my question. Did you bring this into the relationship? A quick and easy way to answer that is, have your previous relationships, if that applies, been like this? Have you been abusive, hurtful, controlling, manipulative in other relationships? Have you done it toward people you care about? I'm not talking about little things like I made a mistake once, or I used to treat my brother or my sister badly and now we get along great. It was just a thing, between siblings. I'm talking about emotionally abusive behavior, probably the kind that you've experienced and the reason that you tuned into this show. If you brought it in to the relationship, then yeah, you might have some behaviors that you need to look at. In my Healed Being program, I talk about how emotionally abusive behavior almost always comes from unhealthy coping mechanisms. If you didn't learn how to cope when you were younger with challenging situations, with hurtful people, because you probably couldn't when you were a child especially, you just had to figure out how to survive. And so emotional abuse can stem from that. It often does. It stems from how to survive. The problem is it becomes generalized into thinking, or people generalize things into thinking that almost everything's a threat. A threat to what, though? And that's something else I address in that program is, what is the threat that causes you to be hurtful? That's what I'll ask them. And I'll usually address a fear of abandonment, a fear of rejection, a feeling of not being worthy enough or not being valued, the fear of being alone. So usually these fears, they kick in, they cause them to become emotionally triggered, and that creates emotionally abusive behavior, because if they can control you so that they aren't abandoned and they aren't rejected and they aren't alone, then they're getting what they need to survive. And it's not really survival, but it can feel like that. I mean, they're not going to die, but it feels like that. It can feel like they're going to die, or at least they're going to experience so much pain that they refuse to experience that pain. They don't want to face it, so they essentially put that pain onto you. They put that suffering onto you. I don't want to feel alone. I don't want to feel rejected. I don't want to be abandoned. I don't want to feel unvalued. So I'm going to make you focus on yourself and defend yourself and continue to explain yourself and make you the primary subject of our relationship, who always has to feel like they're doing something wrong and making you always feel guilty, because if the spotlight is on you, then I don't have to worry about this stuff or face this stuff. And you, being so generous and kind and loving and supportive, are going to want me to feel good and happy that you're going to do whatever you can to make that happen. So the emotional abuser's controlling behavior becomes inadvertently sometimes enabled by you. I'm not saying you're doing it. I'm not saying it's your fault. I'm saying what ends up happening is that they make you feel all these things, and in return, you try to make up for it. You try to make them feel good. So they find out that their controlling and manipulative behavior works. And that is completing the cycle. That is completing the abuse cycle. When it works, there's no reason to change it. So they keep doing it. And so, like I was saying, I started talking about coping mechanisms. That's what happens. If you have developed any type of abusive or hurtful behaviors, it could be, or probably is, because you haven't found a way to cope, either when you were younger or after this relationship that you may be in started, or if you're not in a relationship, any relationship where you're experiencing any type of controlling or manipulative behavior. You don't know how to handle it, so you find another way to deal with it. And when I was younger, I didn't know how to handle conflict, so my way to deal with it was to be passive-aggressive or give the silent treatment. That was my emotionally abusive behavior. And it seemed to work for me, but then as my relationships failed over and over again, I realized that these tools that I'm using aren't tools at all. They're destructive, they're hurtful, and they keep ruining my life. They take away my happiness. And of course, they take away the happiness of the people that I cared about. But when I was younger, I didn't know how to cope. So I did what I can to survive. But I took those survival mechanisms into my adult relationships, thinking they still applied. And when I was younger, they did apply. They served me. The way I responded to challenges back then, my coping mechanisms, the ones I created when I was younger to deal with challenging situations, the abusive alcoholic household I was living in, and all kinds of scary moments because of that, caused me to develop coping mechanisms that I never addressed. And I just brought them into the, quote, real world to live my life as if that's the way I was supposed to be. So the reason I said all that is because I'm going to read you an email that has to do with a lot of what I just talked about. And I'm hoping I can help her. I'll read you the email right now. She said, "First, thank you so much for what you do. Your podcast has opened my eyes in so many ways. I started listening because I was afraid I was the abusive partner. I started believing all the insults that my husband threw at me. When I found your podcast, I realized that I had been trained to believe that I was the one at fault. With therapy, I have learned how to put healthy boundaries up with my husband when he begins his explosive name-calling and gaslighting. He has lost control of me in many ways because I don't react the way I used to. I used to cry, I used to beg for forgiveness or a second chance. He actually began seeing a marriage counselor because, quote, he couldn't handle me anymore because he needed help dealing with the marriage. He said he doesn't want to do counseling together, which I told him I'll respect. As of this writing, he's had only 2 sessions, but I told him I was proud of this positive step he was taking in his life. My problem is, now that the smoke is settling in my heart and I'm making my own positive self-changes, I'm realizing how much I've changed. The more I unravel and realize how abusive he's been emotionally and financially, the angrier I get. I'm afraid of becoming abusive because of my anger, and I'm constantly trying to talk myself down, especially when he tries his old tricks. I see him for what he's been, and I hope he wants to change, but is it possible for someone to forgive and forget after a decade of abuse?" All right, thank you for sharing that, and you got some good questions in here because after someone starts healing, there is a transition the relationship goes through. The transition is the oppressed now becomes free. So if you've been in an emotionally abusive relationship and you've been the victim, you have been oppressed. You have been emotionally oppressed. It's something, again, I talk about in the Healed Being program, where the perpetrator of emotional abuse has emotionally imprisoned their victim. It sounds awful the way I'm saying it, but maybe you feel this way. Maybe people listening right now can connect with this. There really is the feeling that you are emotionally imprisoned, like you can't experience life the way it is because you can only experience the emotions that you are fed or you're told to feel, or you can't get past how you feel because you keep getting blamed and made responsible for what the problems are in the relationship. So you're very restricted emotionally, and that can feel like an emotional prison. And that's why I say when you're in an emotionally abusive relationship, you feel oppressed the whole time. And you may not even call it that. You may not even think that's the right word. But what ends up happening is that after the emotional abuser stops abusing, I mean, they literally have an epiphany or get some help, they suddenly aren't doing the abusive behavior anymore. And now you have to figure out how you show up in the relationship and what your role is. Because the entire time you've been in the emotionally abusive relationship, you've responded to every event with the abusive behavior. And what I mean by that is you have learned how to live your life with abuse. You've learned how to live your life suffering. And you've also learned that you are imprisoned. Like I said, it feels like you're in prison, like an emotional prison. And because of that, when the oppressor releases the oppressed, there's going to be a lot of feeling. There's going to be a lot of liberation, of course, but there's also a reconnection with yourself that needs to take place. Who the heck am I? I don't know who I am anymore. I've done this same thing for years and years. I've been this person for so many years that I've lost myself. And so you're going to go through several feelings and thoughts, and you're going to maybe be angry, and you're going to want them to feel the pain that they put you through. You're going to want to maybe get back at them. You're going to maybe close your heart off because the whole time you'd been trying was just such a drain on you that when you're finally freed, you start to wonder why you were trying in the first place. You might have that thought. You might wonder, why am I wasting my time trying to be nice to this person when they've been nothing but mean to me? And so you're in this odd space that when you're freed, the oppressor opens the prison door and you look at them and you think, what's going on? First of all, you're in disbelief. Why are you letting me go? What's going on? And you think probably that you're going to be let through the next door and there'll be a pit of lava. You probably think there's going to be something just as bad or worse in the next or beyond the next door. So you come out of your emotional prison cell thinking that there's got to be something wrong here. There's got to be a mistake because this isn't normal. And so now you're in this confused state. It's like cognitive dissonance. Huh? What is going on? This doesn't make any sense. And so you start walking, feeling like, okay, they're going to pull me back into this prison any minute now, so I'm not sure if I should be happy about this. Then you walk out of the building, and then you walk to the street, and you find a ride home, and you're still in disbelief. You still can't believe that you're out of this prison, and you don't know what to do. What is life without the abuse? Where are you inside? I mean, where have you been? Where did you go? And so this disbelief and this confusion kicks in, And then maybe this resentment or regret or anger will start up, and you'll think, I am really mad that this person put me through this the whole time. And look at all these years I've wasted. Look at all these years that went by, and I could have done something or anything else with my life. But instead I was trying to please that person. I'm not saying you should feel this way. I'm saying this is what usually happens. What usually happens when the emotional abuse stops is that you have all these feelings and thoughts and you think, I'm free. But now that I'm free and I don't have to continuously focus on what I need to do and what is going to be the next proverbial brick that hits me in the head, I don't have to think about that at all. So where do my thoughts go now? Where do they come from? What are they about? I don't even know how to think without being abused. That's what can happen. And that's why it's just a weird state of mind that you're in when you come out of this oppression. And so you get out of the oppression, and then you look at your oppressor, and you have all these thoughts and feelings. And then here's the next part of this. They start being nice to you, and they want to connect with you again. And you think, you got to be kidding me. You want to connect with me after what you just put me through? I don't want to connect with you. I don't know what I want to do. I'll punch a wall. I want to punch you. I'm so mad, or I'm so sad that I spent all my time and energy with someone who treated me like that. And now you open the door and you think everything's going to be okay. No, I've got a lot of thoughts. I got a lot of feelings. I got a lot to process. My life has just flashed by me, and the whole time I feel like I was defending myself and trying to deal with my guilt, and here I am being free, and you just say, sorry, you're free now. I didn't mean to hurt you, and I hope you can forgive me. I'm really minimizing it because the people I've worked with in the program, they'll say that they feel awful. They feel so awful. Most of them will say this. I feel so guilty. I feel so awful. I can't believe I put them through all this stuff. At the same time, a lot of them will say, why can't they just forgive me and move on? And that I have to address, because pretty much what I just said is the reason they can't forgive you and move on. They can't just walk out of the prison and say, oh, you didn't mean to imprison me for 10 years. That's okay. Let's just reconnect and move on. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. There's a lot to process and a lot to deal with and heal from and hopefully release. And sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. And this is the moment after being freed that you get to find out if your heart has been closed and sealed, or if there's still a chance to unlock it, open it just a crack, and discover if they're really healing or really healed or not. That's the moment you start to assess that. Before, it was all about focusing on, what do I need to do next to make sure that the abusive behavior doesn't happen? That focus has always been on, what do I need to do to maintain a good balance and maintain a somewhat healthy relationship? It's been the main focus most of the time. So when you come out and that's not your focus anymore, what do you focus on? If there's no abuse coming your way, what do you focus on? And that's a question for you, because you're going to experience this differently. And hopefully the abusive behavior does stop, but everyone experiences this differently. So in relation to this person's question, I kind of set this up in this way because if the husband really is healing and changing, he needs to expect that his wife, the person who wrote, needs a lot of time to see this other person that has never been there, or at least wasn't the beginning, but then he changed, and see if this other person really is healing and is not going to hurt her anymore, because she's going to have total PTSD for a while. She's going to be triggered because the things that he used to be triggered by, if he's not triggered by those things anymore, she has to understand what the new norm is. She has to kind of live it for a while, for maybe a long time, to understand if his old behavior is going to come out. Is he still mean? Is he still hurtful? Is he still name-calling? Is he still gaslighting? And according to this email, he is. So it doesn't sound like he's healed. He needs to work on this stuff. But is he making progress is the first question. And progress means what used to trigger him is now not triggering him as much and will eventually not trigger him at all. That's an indicator of progress. I mean, I talk about relationship progress as being a trend line. If things are going great, then the trend line is going either up and to the right or just steady going to the right. Like if it goes up and to the right, the business is making a profit. In relationships, if it's going up and to the right, the relationship is progressing. It's getting better. The healing is happening. The triggers aren't as prevalent and they're going away. That to me is progress. So she needs to assess this. If the old triggers that used to make him do his abusive behavior, if they're not improving and going away, then there is no progress. That's pretty much the bottom line. They have to improve by either slowly disappearing or disappearing altogether, or there is no progress. Now, that doesn't mean that he's fully healed. It doesn't mean that he won't ever get triggered again. But it's important for the victim of emotional abuse to keep testing it. And this is what this person will go through. She'll need to make sure that the healing is taking place by trying to rub those old wounds or old triggers. I mean, she's not doing it intentionally or being abusive. She's doing it because she needs to make sure that it's okay to start trusting him again and trusting the situation again. Because all she's used to is being hurt. And if suddenly you're no longer hurt, you have to understand what the new normal is. Is the new normal safe? Can I trust again? Can I walk in the door without being yelled at? Can I put a scratch in the car without being berated? If you can get through these old triggers and they have a completely different response as if they are a different person, then you might be going in the right direction. So her question is it possible for someone to forgive and forget after 10 years of abuse? Well, the answer is yes, and the answer also depends on two things. Have you sealed your heart shut? Meaning you can't let him in anymore. He had his chance, you've had your time, but after being released, from the emotional abuse, then have you closed your heart completely? There's one way that I can tell if there's a chance that an abusive relationship that goes through a transition where the abuser stops abusing and starts healing, and the victim of that abuse also starts healing, the victim still has to have love in their heart for the other person. And I always say, if there's still love in their heart, there's a chance. That means that you still want to connect with the person that you believed they were when you first met. If you want to have some sort of connection, but it has to be a healthy, nice, supportive, loving connection, not an unhealthy or abusive connection. If you still want a connection with the parts of them that you found were good and healthy and happy and fun, then yes, there is a chance. The challenge will be for you to reach 100% trust again, because if you don't, then it feels like you're walking on eggshells all the time. You already know what that feels like. If you feel like you're walking on eggshells, walking on thin ice, and one wrong move gets the proverbial boot to the head, then you can't connect. You can't let yourself go fully. You can't be in it completely because you still don't trust. So it takes a long time. This is another thing that perpetrators of abuse that have started the healing process have to understand, is that when the victim is going through their healing process and starting to figure out what they want in their life now that they're not being controlled or manipulated, and trying to figure out if they still want to have a relationship with the other person, then they have to realize, the perpetrator has to realize that the victim has a long way to go. And it might take, I like to say, anywhere from 6 months to a year. If you can't make a decision within a year, then you probably can't make a decision. I like to look at it. If you can make a decision between 6 months and a year, or even sooner, I mean, everyone does this differently, but if it's been over a year and you've been wondering if you can reconnect with this person and you're still not there, you probably can't. It's just not there because something hasn't changed and something has to. They may not even do the abusive behavior anymore, but if you still have this anger or animosity toward them or this resentment, then if you haven't healed from that, you need to work on that if you want to give this relationship a chance. I mean, you should work on it anyway, but if you want to give this relationship a chance, if you think there is a chance, then you do need to work on what's going on inside of you. And that requires trust that you may feel you can never have. And because of that, that's the point where if you can't get to that point where you can trust again, then you do need to separate from each other. I mean, that's my opinion, of course, but separating helps you get away from old influences and old stimuli that used to cause these emotional triggers. Because when you're with each other, it's hard to think without the other person in your brain. When you're without each other, you have an opportunity to start thinking without that person. There's no influence, there's no manipulation, even if it was unintended. That other person is completely absent from your life. Now the fog can really lift, and now you can think about what you want for yourself. And this doesn't always mean you have to separate or divorce or stay apart from each other forever. It just means you might need the time to do it. You might need the time so that you can think for yourself without another person's influence. And so to the person who wrote, it's very difficult. If he's still name-calling, if he's still angry, then I hope he's still going to therapy. I hope he's doing his part. I hope he's reflecting. And I definitely hope that he's not focused on you anymore. Because this is another thing. The perpetrator of emotional abuse will continuously and almost obsessively focus on the person they're abusing. What are they doing now? What are they going to do now to make my life difficult? What are they going to do wrong that I have to point out? Always focused on the other person. And that just, as the victim of emotional abuse, that leaves you under the watchful eye of someone who is micromanaging you, microcontrolling you. And that's not fun. That's oppression. Because if you can't live autonomously and independently with someone else, then you're not living autonomously and independently. You're living under the oppression or the rule of someone that doesn't let you be yourself. And that is no way to live. It's very difficult to be with someone who doesn't let you be yourself. You like certain things. You like things that maybe they don't like. And you have hobbies that maybe they don't want or care about. You have friends that maybe they don't really think about or care about. You have your own life. And we both bring our own life into every relationship. The problem with emotional abuse is that the abuser starts to take away what is in your life to make them the way they want you to be. They control you to the point where you have only what they believe you need to have. And because of that, you feel imprisoned. You feel trapped. I know you might be resonating with this right now, and I'm sorry to make you think of this if you're in a situation that you do feel trapped, but there is a way out, and sometimes it's hard to get there. This person who wrote said she started standing up for herself, and she wouldn't submit to his abusive ways, and he probably got worse because of that. And this is kind of ridiculous, he went to therapy because he couldn't handle her anymore. That's just ridiculous because she finally now is doing what she believes she should do, is be herself. And somebody who loves you wants you to be yourself. She was standing up for herself. Somebody who loves you wants you to stand up for yourself. She was starting to honor and enforce her own boundaries, and someone who loves you wants you to do that because they want you to be happy, because they know that honoring yourself is a way to make yourself happy. And when somebody honors you, honoring yourself, that is the ultimate form of love and connection and bonding, because you want to be with people that want you to be who you want to be. That's my take, at least. And I hope this helps the person who wrote. It's a difficult situation if you're still in it and he's still going off on you, because if you're not seeing the changes, then I hate to say it, but some people need more accountability. If they can't see it when you stand up for yourself and honor yourself, and they still don't get it, then the next step is probably separation for a while. So they realize that if they don't change, they will lose what they're trying to control so badly. Thanks for writing, and thanks for listening to another episode of Love and Abuse. Share this with others that might benefit. Love and Abuse is the official podcast of the Mean Workbook, an assessment and healing guide for difficult relationships. Use the workbook to help you determine if you are in an emotionally abusive relationship, and it'll give you the tools to pinpoint the specific unhealthy behaviors causing you to leave so many interactions feeling bad. If you're in a difficult relationship and you want to know what your next step should be, the assessment and the workbook will help you make the right decisions for you. Visit loveandabuse.com for more information. If you've discovered that you are doing emotionally abusive behavior and you'd like to change that about yourself, sign up for the Healed Being program over at healedbeing.com. This show exists to remind you that you are not alone and you're not going crazy. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. You deserve honesty and sincerity. You deserve to be treated as worthy and significant, because you are. Thank you for joining me today. We'll talk again soon.